Welcome to the Meditation Nest, Bedtime Stories for Adults. I'm Beth Buttram, your host and narrator. Here, stories become gentle meditations, designed to help your thoughts unwind as you slow the tempo of your life and embrace the night ahead. I invite you to slow your breath, soften your thoughts, and find peace as you drift into rest. This is your time to rest, reflect, and dream. Tonight I'm bringing you a story called The Tide Listener. Set in a tranquil coastal village where the sea hums against smooth stones, this tale follows a solitary figure who spends each evening by the water's edge, listening to the rhythmic ebb and flow of the tides and the secrets carried in the salted wind. It's a gentle reflection on the art of listening, the beauty of renewal, and the wisdom of letting go, unfolding like the tide itself. As you listen, allow the story to wash over you, carrying you toward rest and perhaps toward the quiet truths that drift back when we no longer chase them. Let's begin. In a small coastal village, where seagulls carve lazy circles above the harbor, and the air always tastes faintly of salt and memory, there lived a man who listened to the sea. No one quite remembered when he had arrived. Some said he had once been a sailor who forgot how to return. Others believed he was simply a man who followed the sound of waves until he found the one that matched the rhythm of his heart. Whatever the truth, he became known in that unspoken way small towns confer titles as the Tide Listener. Each evening, when the last of the fishermen tied off their boats and the harbor bells tolled once, he walked the narrow sand path that wound through the dunes. The path was always changing, reshaped by wind, erased by tide, but he knew it by heart. When he reached the edge of the world, he would settle himself upon a smooth, time-worn rock, the same one the sea had been shaping long before he was born. There he'd sit and listen. The sea was never just one voice. It was 1,000 murmurs woven together, the hush of foam, the sigh of the undertow, the faint percussion of shells rolling in the surf. Above it all, the wind whispered in long ribbons, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed, and sometimes the faint sweetness of honeysuckle from the cottages beyond the dunes. He listened until the world seemed to breathe in time with him, until the pulse of the waves met the rhythm of his own heart. Sometimes he thought the sea was telling him stories. Sometimes he thought it was remembering them for him. He had come to the sea because silence, once comforting, had become unbearable. The house he lived in, weathered shingles, off-kilter fence, a small garden of wild thyme and lavender still held the ghost of laughter. A mug left on a counter. The half-finished scarf in a basket by the window. A scent that had long since faded, but still hovered in his mind when the evening light slanted just so. There had been 2 chairs at the kitchen table once. One now sat empty. He tried, at first, to fill the quiet. He mended nets for the fishermen, though he was not one of them. He helped repair roofs after storms, offered to paint shutters, carried groceries for the widows who spoke softly in the marketplace. But every kindness returned him to his own emptiness. One evening, weary of trying to outpace the ache, he walked to the shore and sat where the land gave way to water. He did not speak or pray or think. He simply listened. The sea met him with its rhythm, reaching, retreating, reaching again, and something inside him eased. The grief did not vanish, but it loosened its grip. He began to understand that the sea was not in a hurry, that even endings belonged to a larger rhythm. He returned the next night, and the next, and after that, every night the tide would let him. Over the months that followed, the sea became his teacher. He began to recognize its moods, the gentle lull of summer mornings, the restless churn before a storm, the metallic shimmer of winter tides. He noticed how no wave ever returned in quite the same way, and yet every one was part of the same whole. The villagers began to nod to him as they passed, not unkindly, but with that respectful distance reserved for those who keep unusual company. Children would sometimes wave and ask, "What do you hear out there?" He'd smile and say, mostly patience. One child, a boy who lived near the pier, took to visiting him. He'd sit in the sand, drawing shapes with a driftwood stick, while the man listened. The boy's chatter came and went like the breeze. Stories about fishing nets, about how far the horizon really was, about his mother's soup. One night, as the boy skipped stones, he asked, "Does the sea ever talk back to you?" The man considered this question. "It does," he said finally, "but not with words, more with reminders." "Reminders of what?" asked the boy. "That everything returns," he said softly, "but not always the way we expect." The boy frowned thoughtfully. "Like when you send a letter in a bottle?" He smiled. "Exactly like that." As the seasons turned, the man's listening deepened. He heard the difference between morning tides and twilight ones, the first crisp and eager, the latter slow and contemplative. He noticed how the moon's pull shaped everything: the tides, the wind, even the hush of the village when night rose. Sometimes he would close his eyes and let the sound carry him. He'd imagine that every exhale of the sea carried away a small fragment of what he no longer needed. An old regret, an unanswered question, the lingering ache of goodbye. In return, the waves brought him something new: a thought, a memory, a calm he hadn't earned but was offered anyway. He began to feel, slowly and quietly, that perhaps he was not as alone as he thought. One evening, after a long spell of rain, the sea was restless. Waves crashed higher than usual, spraying the rocks in veils of white. The man stayed well back, yet still he listened. From behind him came the crunch of footsteps. It was Mara, a woman from the village who sold fish and kept her hair tied with a blue ribbon that never seemed to stay put. "You'll catch a chill out there," she said, voice half teasing, half genuine. He turned slightly. "I've been colder," he said. She studied him. "People say you talk to the sea." He shook his head. "No, I listen to it." "Does it answer?" He smiled faintly. "Only when I stop asking." She laughed softly. "Then you must be patient." "Not patient," he said, "just learning not to rush the tide." Something in his voice made her pause. She looked at him a moment longer, then nodded and left him to his listening. He watched her figure fade into the mist, the sound of her footsteps merging with the sea's sighs. That night, for the first time in a long while, he found himself humming, a small little tune that rose and fell with the surf. When spring returned, he began to notice the world in layers again. The green flare of new grass between the dunes, the way the sky deepened to violet after sunset, the faint hum of bees returning to the lavender patch outside his cottage. He still visited the sea each evening, but now he lingered afterward, walking the beach at low tide. He gathered bits of sea glass and driftwood, not out of need, but out of gratitude, for the quiet beauty left behind by something vast and ever-moving. One evening, as twilight unfurled in streaks of gold and indigo, he found himself whispering a thank you. Not to anyone, but to everything. To the sea, to the wind, to the small, steady motion of life continuing. The tide crept closer, washing over his bare feet, cool and deliberate. He felt it circle his ankles, retreat and return, over and over. He thought then of the woman who once shared his home. The sound of her laughter, the way she'd always paused before speaking, as though tasting her words. He thought of the quiet mornings they shared, the cups of tea gone cold while they watched storms roll in. And for the first time, the memory did not ache. It shimmered like sea light. He whispered her name, and the waves carried it away. By the time summer came again, the man had changed. Now the evenings no longer weighed on him with the heaviness of remembrance. Instead, they brimmed with quiet awe. He still visited the shore every night, settling among the sand and seagrass, but the quiet that wrapped around him was full, reverent rather than sorrowful. The subtle shift in his presence was noticed by those who passed. The fisherman heading home, the grocer on her evening stroll. When she saw them, he'd greet them with a gentle nod, sometimes even letting a small, genuine smile break across his face, a silent acknowledgement of shared place and time. Children, who once regarded him with a respectful distance, began to gather near where he sat, drawn by a new warmth in his manner. He welcomed them with a wave, making space beside him on the driftwood log. The stories he told had changed, too. They were no longer tales shadowed by grief, but ones shimmering with wonder, stories of the secret language of waves and the invisible highways beneath the surface, where currents carried messages along vast distances. He spoke of whales that sang songs no human had ever fully understood, their voices echoing from one end of the ocean to the other, and of the wind, how it whispered its secrets to the tide, and the tide replied in salt and spray. The children listened, wide-eyed, mouths half open in amazement. The youngest clutched handfuls of shells as if they might hold some magic, while the older ones asked questions, their curiosity blooming in the twilight. Are those stories true? The man's eyes would crinkle at the corners, his gaze turning thoughtful and kind. Everything is true if you listen long enough, he would reply, his voice carrying the gentle certainty of someone who had learned the language of patience and tides. And as the last light faded, he'd watch their faces, knowing that wonder, like the sea, could carry you farther than sorrow ever could. On another evening, near the solstice, the tide was exceptionally high. The horizon glowed silver, and the air was warm and salt thick. The man closed his eyes and breathed with the sea, his heart quiet and unhurried. He felt, in some deep, wordless way, that he had become part of the rhythm he once sought to understand. The waves came and went. The sea breathed in, he breathed out. For a moment there was no separation, just one endless motion of water, wind, and life continuing. When he opened his eyes, the moon had risen fully, spilling its light over the water. It shimmered like a path stretching toward forever. He smiled, knowing he didn't need to follow it. Everything he needed had already returned. The end. The sea teaches in rhythms, not in words. It does not promise that what is lost will return unchanged, only that it will return transformed. The Tide Listener reminds us that healing isn't about forgetting, but about flowing, allowing grief, joy, and stillness to coexist like the currents that shape the shore. When we learn to listen without seeking, to wait without rushing, we begin to hear the deeper language beneath the noise. It's the sound of patience, of cyclical renewal, of life whispering that nothing is ever truly gone. Even in the quiet, the tide is always moving, and if we listen closely enough, it tells us that we are too. As you drift off, let the gentle rhythm of your own breaths calm you, much like the ebb and flow of a gentle tide. Good night. As this episode comes to a gentle close and the world outside grows quiet, may you find comfort within your own meditation nest. Let your mind settle softly. May tranquility wrap around you, inviting deep rest and serene dreams until dawn. If you'd like to help keep the meditation nest aglow, please consider buying me a cup of coffee by visiting ko-fi.com/BethPodcast. Every small kindness helps the light travel a little further. You can also access a free weekly blog on substack.com. Check the show notes for links. Until we meet again, rest in the quiet knowing that you are safely held by the night.